Hello, and welcome back to Parley, the show where you folks support the other stuff I make by paying me monthly to talk about the topic of your choice. This month, True Mr.FOoT requests a parlay on parlay questions. There's a spoilered out part that I'll read later. I, Zandy, hardly ever reject requests, but I had to consider it for this one because this borders insanity. This might get a little confusing, but it's going to be alright as long as you remember that everything I say is part of the question until our signal. True Mr.FOoT is requesting a discussion on the way people write their parlay requests, or at least that's what I'm gathering from their Discord message. Anyway, let's get into the topic at hand, True Mr.FOoT writes. This is my parlay for January. This month we will talk about, by the way, me, Zandy speaking, this is not a bit. If you think this is still the thing from the beginning of this request that keeps on giving, then it totally is, except it's not. You know, when I get parlay like these, I sometimes wonder how far you folks will go in creating new stuff, and I'm always astonished by the things you create and how you always put in this much effort. Allow me to comment on that. This is totally not necessary, but it shows how much you folks like this, and it gives me faith in my future business. Now, because Parley is this amorphous buildcraft object of our own desires, we will take the time to get to the bottom of this. In case you're wondering if the thing is still going, it's not. You might remember when the actual request ended a while ago. The nature of Parley, Mr.FOoT says, lies in the creation of a topic that I can talk about at length without preparation. Now, some of you have spent a great effort to circumvent my natural desire to find an answer to all problems in life. After all, I spend every waking moment of my life thinking about everything. A short side note, this is the weirdest parlay request I ever got. It really is true, Mr.FOoT. You're right on this one. Do you ever wonder if God is afraid of what they created? I don't know why the true G Mr. F to the double OT said there's a spoilered out bit, because there is no spoilered out thing anywhere. Everything I say is a part of this question, except for the things that I say which are of my free will. Ha! Gotcha. Now we have unraveled this request. How do we proceed? Okay, a lot to respond to. This is another attempt, and it's not at all the only attempt anyone has made to kind of break parlay. So I will now discuss things on my own, but we won't get too much into breaking down the request itself because I feel like that's what you're asking for. That's sort of part of the request. We could break down exactly how it's trying to confuse the audience, but I feel like that isn't in the spirit of the request. So we're not going to do that. I am going to mention that I think an interesting thing this request made me notice is how it's different depending on whether you watch parlay or not, right? Like this is a very audio format piece of media. And so a lot of people will just use it as a podcast. I encourage it to be used as a podcast. It just doesn't really take me any more effort to have a video component to it. So I just do that as well. And I know people like that. Sometimes it's very relevant. It definitely adds flexibility. But yeah, like I can't say all of this without reading it. And so you can see me reading it, right? And there's also this element that I try to use consistently to show you that I'm talking about the thing they said, and I try to make that consistent. And so if you were watching this one, you were probably pretty clear on what was and wasn't Mr.FOoT's like text that they wrote, blurb. And if you were listening to it, you were maybe a little less clear. I tried very hard to say the things the way I would say them. I personally, it's hard. I mean, I would have had to practice it. Mr.FOoT requested that I read it without like, I guess, practicing. So yeah, that was the first thing I thought. The second bit that I have some notes. The second bit that it made me think about is how I didn't realize that I said this many regular things during parlay. I don't say all those things every time, but I do, I guess, like interrupt the parlay request a lot. I feel like I should stop doing that. I guess maybe it's not that bad. This makes it seem worse than it is probably, but I'll try to stop doing that as much. I feel like that's not good. I think I should just be willing to let the thing be. I think maybe it has to do with my own self-consciousness about allowing my voice to be co-opted to say something, but the whole premise of parlay is that I get to respond right after anyway, so it's fine. Like, I just need to relax about that, I think. It's not dangerous. Hardly anyone sees these, right? Like this is meant to be for a very small audience that really wants, I guess, like a podcast from me, right? That's who this is meant to be for. It's not trying to meant to, it's not going to get a lot of views. If this channel started getting a lot of views, I might even do something to make it get less, provided I was making enough money. Just because I want it to be able to be whatever it can be and not really be influenced by the presence of the audience, I guess. I would even go so far as to say I think it becomes a worse service if the audience is too big, because then the people requesting stuff are worried that it will mess it up or something. No matter how much I say it doesn't need to be a, you know, numerically successful channel, some people will still be intimidated by that, I guess. The fact that it's a small stage like a coffee house or open mic night rather than the main channel and you're deciding on a video for the main channel, I do feel like that adds some value where you know your request doesn't have to do well or appeal to a lot of people or anything. You know, it's for a pretty specific group of people. That's perfectly fine. It's going to be for the super core audience, and that's pretty much it. And that's totally the intention. What else do we have to say? So yeah, after those opening thoughts, a bunch of notes. Right. So there's this whole topic of breaking parlay as a format, which I've always found really interesting and sort of not discouraged you all from doing. I think the main way that this one attempts to break it a little bit is that it's the first thing I thought of was that it's sort of lying to the audience. If we were to do a parlay like this, but the request was written in a way that intentionally confuses the audience about which thing I'm saying and not, but the request wasn't about me breaking down that topic, I think I would probably reject it, because it's you trying to make it so the audience isn't clear on what my opinion is. You know, I said before, it's fine because I get to respond with my own take right afterward. But if the point of the request is to make it unclear which thing I mean, I would say that that kind of breaks the safety on Parlay a little bit, where you know, there is no thought crime, or it's not wrong to bring up a topic. But if I don't get to have a distinct opinion from the one that you put forth, I feel like that's a bit dangerous. Like there are some problems with that. That's interesting. You know, this partly made me think that my interjections, or the little things I say, shall we summarize them a little bit? Actually, um, are a problem because they make it less clear where the request ends and where my take begins. Keeping those more separate is in my best interest too. It doesn't just make it more listenable or something. Maybe you don't agree that that's bad for the listening aspect of the parlay, but I personally think that it kind of violates the safety of having the requester's thing and then my thing. Not that any of these are particularly risque things to ask, by the way, just to say that that's a theoretical danger. Yeah, let's look through and see if I can pull out all the things that I normally say, um, or say really often. I've been thinking that I'm gonna say the intro bit that I normally do. Hello and welcome back to Parlay, the show where you folks support the other stuff I make by paying me monthly to talk about the topic of your choice. I think that's bad. I need to. I've only been doing that for a little while. I've got to stop and change it. I'm not sure what it should be. I do feel like there's some value in saying what parlay is, but it should really have some specific goals in mind when I say that, like alleviating the pressure on the requester to make something that's gonna do well or whatever. Like we want to get that out of the way. That doesn't matter. Making it clear to the audience that this is something someone else requested. So in the past, I've had people who were confused having found this channel from another channel of mine, and they wondered why. It's hard to explain why I think this should exist, basically, or why I think this is a piece of content of the quality of the other things, right? And it's maybe good to say at the beginning that I don't, it isn't, that's not, it's something else. You know, somebody paid me to do this thing. That I feel like is valuable. Maybe I should say it in more plain terms, like, hi, like you're listening to Parlay. I was paid $9 by blankety blank to talk about this. But I always worry about that because I feel like that way of saying it, It can work well when you have a sponsor, but I don't love it for these because it implies that I'm only talking about this because I'm being paid to talk about it. Um, which really isn't. I mean, I guess it's true in the sense that that's the occasion, but the reason I do this for a living is because I enjoy it a lot more than talking about some random sponsor's product. I don't know. So it's hard. I'll keep fiddling with that. That's the thing I took away from this. Um, let's see other things. Getting to the topic at hand, or me saying I don't know what this is. Like Mr. Voot asks, requests, like what even is it? Maybe I get too hung up on that. I think a little bit of why I do that sometimes is because I'm warming up some of the time. Secretly, not at all secretly, because I'm telling you right now, Parley is also partially intended to be a warm up for other things I make in the day. You may have noticed if you watch the streams a lot and just other stuff that I make that Parley is usually when there's a lot of natural lighting or just very nice ambient light in the room. The webcam quality is kind of better in Parley because I feel like it needs to be because my face is on the entire screen, but also because I'm doing it during the beginning of the day where even during right now it's the winter in my time zone or part of the world. There's a lot of ambient light and so it looks better. Even with my only mediocre lighting setup, you can't get excellent lighting for an image this big using a rudimentary light setup like I have. You would need more, and to be more of a professional at lighting. Truthfully, you probably need a bigger space for it to be too easy, because there's not a lot of room for light to diffuse. This is just not a big room. So, yeah, I do also partially use Parley as a way to warm up, to get ready to talk for a Zandy Pants YouTube channel video or for the stream that is later in the day, 3 out of every 7 days, you know. And so some of the time, me saying, this month, blankety blank, what even are they doing? Is just me being awkward because I haven't warmed up as much. But I could get that part a little bit more down pat. I can do that more. I also think that I should stop saying it's a request. I was thinking about that. It in no way is it a request. You paid me $9, and then unless you act in bad faith or you do something really disingenuous and manipulative, like I'm going to talk about it. In no way is it a request. Just so I don't know. I guess a prompt is what I should call them. Parley prompts. Maybe I don't know. Maybe people have a better take on that. It's usually difficult to follow the comments section for all of this channel's videos, but I will try to look at this one. I'll actually make a note. Try to check back in on this comments section, because people might have good recommendations. What else? Let's see. Yeah, another thing I wanted to say was about the effort bit. I've said that before, that people kind of make more involved Parley requests. I said it again, prompts, let's say for now, then you really need to. My job is supposed to be to have there be something to talk about. You don't have to put in the work of making there be something to talk about. In fact, the very next Parley on this channel is a great example of that, where for various reasons the person had somebody else request a thing, prompt a thing, write the prompt, and it's not really enough for it to be clear what they want, but that's okay. I guess that's the drawback or the upshot. I don't know, that if you don't make a longer prompt, maybe you won't get a half hour of me waffling about the topic you actually want to hear about. I suppose. But a lot of Parley requests are basically you wrote a video. Like eye patch notes is a good example. Not to call anyone specifically out, I don't think they will mind. A lot of eye patch notes, your prompts are you literally write a video and then I add to it, basically. Very high effort. Making an actual YouTube video with game footage about the topic that eye patch notes Parleys are about would take the same amount or maybe even less effort than the Parley requests that or it would take me less effort than that. If I made a video about I'm looking at one of iPatch Notes' previous Parley from earlier this month, about that topic, I would spend less time on it than they did writing that parlay prompt. And that might just be a matter of the things that I have at hand already. Like, to be fair, I guess that's not really true because I spent more time on it over the course of many streams where I talked about that topic. I guess that's why, is that I do a lot of thinking for these off camera or in time when I wasn't even requested that thing. Like, I think about the risks of parlay from time to time. And so to say that I didn't prepare for this parlay, for example, that long is kind of disingenuous. That's sort of why parlay works, is that it's pretty unlikely you're going to ask me a question that I've never even considered even a little bit or anything related to, you know. I would be pretty surprised. I'm just going to scroll through. Is that true? Yeah, so there are some, like, I recently got one with the Donald Duck and the Mickey Mouse meme with the hypocrite that you are, da 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 da, da, that meme. But I'd seen that before, and the topic is basically existentialism, which I've thought about plenty. You know, I took a class on that in college. I'm an existing human. I think about that all the time, right? Not to say it's obvious at all, not at all. Just to say that I spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, whatever. So I guess that's part of it. Is that I don't want to make it sound like them being high effort or like this much effort is a bad thing also, but I don't want people to be intimidated by that. It really is part of the service that you can write as much or as little as you want, depending on what you want, I guess. That's a good point of flexibility that I should leave in. I guess I say as much or as little as I want, but obviously within reason. You know, sometimes people have submitted pages after pages of stuff, and I've said, honestly, I don't think I can parse all of this and give you something interesting in a half hour. So that's something. Well, at this point, this has just been I guess you said a parlay about parlay questions. So, and that's what this has been so far. But it's been about half of it. I guess I should say other things I have in mind. Something that I always think about when parlay like this are asked is Hames Joffman. James Hoffman is a very popular coffee YouTube creator, coffee educator. He owns or is heavily involved in the management of a coffee roaster, Square Mile Coffee Roasters, which not sponsored by the way, but pretty good, pretty good. Pretty fast shipping. They're in England, but you can get it in the US. The shipping is moderate, so you'd want to buy a lot, but you're gonna want to buy a lot because it's really good. Not sponsored, it's just really good. And yeah, he makes cool coffee videos. I think that James Hoffman is a great example of a channel type that we won't talk about too much in this parlay, but that I'm interested in very much, where the subject is very applicable to a lot of people. So the creator can be quite specific and still appeal to a large audience. And I largely believe that specificity correlates very closely with quality. You can make better videos if you talk about a topic that is relevant to a lot of people, even if you make it relatively specific. And I think that James does do that. Hames Joffman is a parody channel that James, approved, and Hames Joffman is basically cuts the James Hoffman videos into very almost non sequitur, not that useful, but it's kind of still weirdly a summary of the main video, videos, or sometimes multiple videos. They're fun. You should go check it out. Now, some of the time those videos go up quickly enough. I promise this is related to Mr.FOoT's topic. Sometimes those videos go up quickly enough that you begin to wonder how even. You know, I suppose they were just on the ball with the editing process. That's possible, but really? I mean, some of the time it's like the main video goes up and an hour later, an unannounced video from James Hoffman has gone up, and an hour later there is a parody video of it. A fully edited, they're short, but the editing process would take some time. The main video was like 20 minutes. They had to watch it, right? So I'm definitely a prescriber to the school of thought that there's maybe a benign conspiracy going on. I feel like that Hames Joffman is someone that James Hoffman knows, or like maybe it's his boyfriend, maybe it's his editor, maybe just a close friend, somebody with intimate access to the video, when the video will go up, him or multiple of those things. The tone of the parody as well is like respectful in a way that you would respect somebody you feel very comfortable gently making fun of, you know what I mean? Which makes me feel like that feels like a close friend or a partner, like an intimate partner. I have no idea, by the way, like I don't know. I just think it's fascinating. It occurred to me that making a parody channel of yourself is actually kind of smart because it sort of cuts off what might be more negative or less tasteful criticism of you by making an for other people impossibly high quality, impossibly on time series of parodies about your own videos. And of course, James Hoffman receives a lot of criticism, so this was an interesting choice if he did it on purpose, or it's even him, maybe, I don't know. But I think that's really interesting. The result of Parley has been similar by a very different route, is basically what I'm getting at. I think that a lot of Parley requests are me talking about something from maybe a devil's advocate position to something I said, or you get to follow up on something I said that maybe some people would object to. And if these ever got like a couple hundred views, maybe a lot of the people that were frustrated with a thing in like a main video or a stream or something would have something that responded to that frustration without it being basically turning me into a straw man argument. I get to talk about it, but from the starting point from someone else. I'm thinking of, there's been a few times we've talked about stuff on streams, for example. Genshin Impact has been a big one, where I don't think I have very controversial opinions about Genshin Impact, but sometimes we talk about things and someone just disagrees. Totally healthy discussion, disagreement, and we talk about it more in one of the Parley, like a more extreme version of that. I don't know. It just came to mind. I think the James Hoffman thing is interesting as well. And he makes a useful channel. I actually really don't like a lot of his brewing guides. I feel like they are not better than brewing in a more simple way. I guess I don't dislike them. They're not superior to a simpler method. They do nothing good or bad. It's interesting to see what he chose to do, but I don't fully understand why you wouldn't just, do this thing. Broadly speaking, my advice for coffee is you don't, if you're doing a complicated brew method, you don't need to. Is my short-term advice. You can make, not just because it isn't necessary to make good coffee, but because it maybe even doesn't make better coffee. It's very rare that something complicated has resulted in a better cup, in my experience. You might be able to get the same cup with an inferior piece of equipment by doing something more complicated, but you could just use a superior piece of equipment. And a lot of them are cheaper, or they're literally made of plastic. Like you don't need to not use those. But I don't know. People have different motivations. People have different opinions, and those are wrong. Instead, you should just use the AeroPress. Anyway, anything else? Before I talk about, I guess, the real secret bit? I don't think so. I think the only other thing as a kind of transitioning point is how Parley has changed. I feel like that's relevant to this question. I wanted to mention the bit about spoilered out bits. Yeah, people have been making really great use of these. It's been interesting to see how over time it has evolved of its own accord. Ideas that I didn't have for how you could make Parley requests work good could have kind of come up over time. I wanted to discuss briefly that I feel like that helps me make better requests. I'm trying to think about how to call to that. Like if someone doesn't put a spoilered out bit, how can I give them the benefit of the spoilered out bit even if they don't choose to put one in? I've been trying to do this more, actually. The idea basically is that I think it helps have the discussion have two acts, as it were. there's a bit where I'm breaking down the prompt in a lot of detail because there often is a lot of detail. The prompt is often a fourth of the parlay, some of the longer prompts. It takes about a fourth of the whole time just to get through the prompt, which again is fine with me. It does kind of mean that the people who write really long prompts get less on average, but you're allowed to do that. That's up to you. A lot of them are cap out at around 5 minutes, which is not that long. That's still pretty long. I don't know. So and then that and then me talking about responding to it or going through it. A lot of the ones where you're meant to go through and break down the prompt point by point, those it's often around 15 minutes or 18 minutes. I've noticed. I often look over at the clock. You can see me doing this if you look for it in Parley videos. Around 15 to 18 minutes, I glance here. I'm just looking at the timer on OBS for the recording to see about where I am. I generally know when it is. Well, apparently I generally know when it is because I almost always look over and it's around the same. It's like the latter half of 20 minutes. And then switching gears a little bit is nice. A lot of the spoiler out bits are very well suited to this. That's quite good. I think that maybe what happened is that in the parlay where I did that, it was kind of better. And so people thought, well, what if I did add a response? And it kind of continues the discussion more. You say a thing, I say a thing, and then you say another thing because you have the spoilered out bit that is sort of able to be a response to my thing. And then I say another thing and it adds a bit to the discussion. And I think that maybe because those parlay just were better, it became popular to add that type of thing in, subconsciously or not. I'm not really trying to claim credit. I guess you all noticed that is good. I think it's very intentional. I don't think the people using the spoilers don't know why they add something to the discussion. I feel like you all do. But I've noticed that it's really good. Those parlay are generally better in my opinion. And so I'm trying to do it myself. I'm trying to look at around 20 plus minutes. I shift gears a little bit. In this one, I'm trying to shift toward talking about how Parley has changed a little. I don't have too much more else to say for this Parley. I thought it was interesting. I had a lot of notes on the block of text. But yeah. I think the only other thing I have to say is that I'm really interested to see how new parlay requesters end up behaving, I guess. I haven't had a good influx of new people from YouTube discoverability for a long time because my Zandypants YouTube channel uploads have been very inconsistent because my life has been very inconsistent. And now that that's finally changing, we're now at the very beginning of that. For the first time this week, there's going to be regular, weekly or bi-weekly uploads for the first time. And if that goes on for long enough, I intend to have it continue from now on. I think I can do that. I've spent a lot of time making a setup that allows me to do that. That's going to be really different. There's going to be a whole bunch of people that have been kind of aware of me as a creator on the internet, but haven't had anything to watch, basically, will for the first time be maybe interested in buying Parley. I will advertise these types of things very, very sparingly, like once or twice a year, for the first time this year. And so it's going to be interesting to see if we notice a difference between the way that a new crop of Parley creators come into the Parley ecosystem compared to people that have been doing it for quite a while. At the moment, almost everyone who has Parley is a stream regular because that's the only place that I really advertised it. That was the consistent thing, So it's interesting to see how those people understand my perspective in a different way than you would if you only got the YouTube videos. I'm quite keen to see if that blows up in my face somehow or whatever. But I don't think it'll be a big deal. I think it'll be interesting. I think that's most of what I have to say. Just talking stuff, a few closing notes that are floating to my mind. It was somewhat easy to read this parlay request in my voice because it's like written as things that I say, mostly the way I would say them. It's very difficult if you're not an experienced, I guess, voice actor or script reader to get to, when Mr.FOoT wrote haha in the request, it's hard to do that organically. I did a very subtle little laugh. I'm also just weird with my laughs. I think ahead of myself and I laugh in the middle of saying something. So it's very difficult to write my laughter, and I also think that's hard to read. Hard for Mr. Foot and for me. Um, Usually I feel like something that Parley makes me appreciate is that just reading in a pleasant way with a not monotonous cadence in an animated way, but not in an artificial sounding way, in a conversational way. A big block of text, that's surprisingly hard if that's not something you do regularly. Reading for an audiobook, for example, in a pleasant way is incredibly taxing. Like, that is very challenging. Doing that for any length of time is hard. I got a request to read poems for the holidays one year, and that was surprisingly difficult. Like, I was tired afterward a little bit. I read a lot of my own work, poetry that I wrote mostly in college, and so I kind of knew this, but I haven't been doing that much lately. So it was something that I didn't remember until the past few years when Parley has picked up a lot. It's hard sometimes. I know this. I hope this isn't really gross. Like, I feel a bit sweaty after I do a little batch of Parley. I often take a shower afterward. It's hard. I mean, I like doing it. It's hard, I guess, physically. Mentally, it's a joy, and that's why I put so much effort into making this my job. I didn't design myself a job that is harder than other work I would have done, unless it's something that I really like, which it is. So. Yeah, thanks for probing Parley a little bit. I feel like the hidden service here is that Mr. Foot and another request like this are kind of finding things that could be issues with Parley before they happen, which is something that I do kind of too much. Maybe I need to relax about that. But I think that it's a good thing. It can only be a positive influence. So I have decided to say thank you. I think that this is the sort of troll Parley request, but its effects are almost entirely positive in my opinion. So thank you. I think it's interesting that you put this type of thought into this thing. It is a much more interesting job than I ever thought I would have the good fortune of having. So yeah, it really makes me feel like the effort I put into doing this for a living was worth it. So thank you.